She is running, not toward anything, away. The kind of running that strips a person down to pure animal instinct, where the lungs burn and the body moves before the mind has finished deciding. Her name is Della Johnson. She is 20 years old, she is brilliant, and in approximately 4 minutes she will be dead. Atlanta, Georgia, October 1989. The 11th floor of Meridian Tower hums under fluorescent lights, and the air holds that combination of cold metal and old paper. The smell of a place where information is stored because someone decided it should never leave. In her jacket pocket, a disposable camera. Inside that camera, photographs of documents that connect a $200 million government contract to a trail of bribes, forged signatures, and bought silence so clean in its corruption it almost reads as elegant. She's been working toward this moment for 3 weeks. She has the proof. She almost makes it out. Almost. The door at the end of the corridor opens, and a young man steps into the light. He is 20 years old, the owner's son, and his voice when he speaks is quiet, almost gentle, which is the most frightening thing about it. He says, "Della, you should not be here." She runs. She hits the stairwell door with both palms and takes 2 floors at full speed, bursting into the second-level parking garage, and that is where it ends. Not cleanly. Not quickly. But definitively. The official police report filed 11 days later called it an accident, a fall. The case was closed before Della's mother had finished choosing what to bury her daughter in. The detective who signed that report retired 6 months later on a pension nobody could account for on a city salary. And the man who stepped into that corridor, Shin Jae-won, 20 years old, the owner's son, went on to build a billion-dollar empire and has slept inside it undisturbed for 35 years. But Della Johnson did not stay gone. She came back. And the man who mistook silence for safety is about to discover it was never either. Atlanta, Georgia, March 2024. Rain moves against the windows of a 3rd-floor office on Peachtree Street in long, steady sheets, and inside, the room holds that combination of cold coffee and open case files. That means someone has been working well past the point when any reasonable person would have stopped. Imani Cole is 34 years old. She sits at a desk covered in photographs, timelines, and handwritten notes, so precise they look typeset. 5 years with the Atlanta PD Cold Case Division. The division that handles the files nobody else wants, the cases that have been waiting so long, they have grown dust. Until the day she walked out mid-shift, left her badge on the desk without a note or an explanation, and never returned. Her colleagues said she burned out. Her captain said she carried too much. Imani never offered a correction to either of them, because she did not yet have the language for what she actually was. And she has always been better at silence than at partial truths. She opened her own firm 6 months later. 1 room, 1 desk, a corkboard that takes up the entire east wall, and a client list built entirely from cases the system had stamped closed without meaning it. Her reputation is the kind that travels quietly, not through advertising or press, but through the quiet network of people who have been failed by official channels and are looking for someone who is not. She is exceptional at what she does, unsettlingly exceptional. Her former partner at the PD used to say she solved cases with information she had not yet been given, and he meant it as admiration, though it carried an unease underneath that neither of them acknowledged. Imani never corrected him because the truth is something she has been carrying since she was 14 years old, and still does not have the precise language for. Only the evidence of it, accumulated across 2 decades in 6 notebooks she keeps in the bottom drawer of her desk. She has kept a dream journal since the year she turned 14. 6 notebooks now, each one filled with the same recurring images in different arrangements. A corridor under fluorescent light, hands that are almost hers gripping a small camera, the sound of a stairwell door, a man's voice, low and controlled somewhere just beyond what she can fully reach. And a feeling that lives underneath all of it, like a bass note held so long it becomes the texture of a room, rather than a sound. Not fear. Something older and more purposeful than fear. The specific gravity of something unfinished that has been looking for a door. She has also carried a terror of parking garages since childhood. Not ordinary discomfort, the kind that closes her throat and turns her hands cold the moment she crosses the threshold of one, regardless of the time of day or how familiar the space. 15 years of therapy, and not one therapist has found its root. Every one of them offered the same conclusion. Something traumatic must have happened that she cannot access consciously. Imani always gave them the same answer back. Nothing happened. I have never been hurt. I simply cannot breathe in those spaces. And every time she said it, she was telling the truth, and not quite all of it simultaneously. Because what she has never said aloud, what she has written only in the margins of the last dream journal, is that the panic does not feel like fear. It feels like grief. The specific, physical grief of someone returning to the place where something that mattered was taken from them and finding it unchanged. On a Tuesday morning in March 2024, a woman named Patricia Johnson walks through Imani's office door and changes the direction of everything. She is 71 years old. Her hands tremble slightly when she sits down. Her coat is older than it needs to be for a woman who carries herself with a dignity that has nothing to do with money, which tells Imani, before a word is spoken, exactly where the money went. Investigations. 4 of them over 35 years, she will say later. 4 investigators who all found the same wall and decided the wall was the end. Patricia places a worn manila envelope on the desk between them. She speaks with the measured precision of someone who has rehearsed these words so many times that the emotion has been compressed into the spaces between them rather than the words themselves. She says, "My daughter was murdered in 1989. She was 20 years old. The police closed the case in 11 days and never reopened it. I need someone to find the truth before I die. The doctors are giving me 6 months. I need to know that Della's name means something before I go." Imani opens the envelope. Police report. A newspaper clipping, 2 paragraphs long, on page 14. 3 photographs taken at a birthday party the summer before Della died, and then the 4th photograph. Della Johnson at 20 years old, caught in natural light coming through a window, her chin slightly lifted, the left brow raised the way it raises in photographs taken without warning. The room goes quiet in a way that has nothing to do with sound. Imani is looking at her own face, not a resemblance that requires generosity or adjustment to perceive. Her face, her eyes, the exact architecture of her jaw, the way light finds the angle between her cheekbone and her temple. She has seen this face every morning in her own mirror for 34 years. She is seeing it now in a photograph taken 35 years before she was born. And the part of her that has spent 20 years filling notebook after notebook with images she could not explain goes very, very still. Patricia's voice reaches her from what feels like a distance. "Miss Cole, are you all right?" Imani does not look up. She says quietly and with complete certainty, "Yes, I'll take the case." She only knows that the noise she has been following her entire career, the thing she called instinct because she had no better word for it, has gone completely silent in a way it never has before. Not absent. Resolved. The way a question goes silent when it finally has its answer. Something that has been traveling a very long time has just arrived. Now, if this story has already reached you, if you felt something in that last moment, do something simple right now. Hit the like button. It costs nothing, and it tells us that stories built at this level are worth continuing to make. We will be back every week with something exactly like this, and you will not want to find out you missed it after the fact. Subscribe and make sure of it. Shin Global Industries occupies the top 12 floors of a midtown Atlanta tower whose glass exterior catches the morning light and throws it back at the city like a statement. The 42nd floor smells of nothing. That specific, expensive, curated nothing that communicates, without announcing, that everything here is controlled down to the air itself. The carpet is the kind that absorbs footsteps entirely. The furniture costs more than most people earn in a year, and it has been chosen precisely because it does not look as though it does. Shin Jae-won built all of this, not inherited. Built, which is the distinction he has always insisted on. The one he returns to in every interview, every profile, every speech, to business school graduates about resilience and vision and the rewards of long thinking. He built it. The distinction matters to him in ways he has never examined closely, because examining it would require standing at the foundation and looking down at what it is poured over. He is 55 years old and carries it with the settled gravity of a man whose wealth has insulated him from every form of friction for 3 decades. He does not raise his voice in meetings because he has never needed to. His silence is the kind that makes rooms realign themselves around it, and his chief legal officer, Harrison Park, has spent 22 years learning to read the texture of each silence and act accordingly. Harrison Park is 60 years old, precisely groomed, economical in movement, and the most functionally dangerous person in any room he occupies, more dangerous than Jaewon himself, because Harrison operates from a place that has no conscience to crack. He separated his sense of right from his sense of professional obligation so long ago that the gap between them has closed over entirely. The way scar tissue closes over a wound until you cannot find the original injury anymore. He manages a quiet, internal division called Legacy Compliance, which appears on the company's official structure as a historical regulatory risk unit, and which has functioned for 22 years as the mechanism by which one truth is kept from ever becoming loud. Every year, Harrison runs a careful scan. Cold case databases, investigative inquiry logs, any movement connected to the 1989 Meridian Tower incident. Every year for 34 years, the scan returns nothing worth reporting. Until March 2024, when a name surfaces in 3 separate database searches within an 11-day window, accompanied by a records request to the city archives for 1989 contract documentation. Harrison enters Jaewon's office on a Wednesday morning without knocking, the only person in the building with that permission, and places a single printed page on the desk. He does not speak. Jaewon reads it. He is silent for long enough that Harrison begins to formulate the next move independently, and then Jaewon says, "Set up a meeting." Harrison asks, with the careful neutrality of someone who has strong opinions and knows when not to voice them, whether that is the right approach. Jaewon looks up and says, "Bring her in. I want to see exactly what she has before I decide anything." Harrison nods and leaves. Jaewon sits alone in the room that smells of nothing and thinks, directly and without the usual management, about the night of October 19, 1989. He was 20 years old. His father had called him from a meeting and told him there was a problem on the 11th floor that needed to be handled personally, that a clerk had found something she should not have found, and that the situation needed to be resolved before morning. His father had not specified how. He has spent 35 years constructing an internal argument in which those 2 facts, his age and his father's imprecision, explain and contain what happened next, and he has never, in all that time, fully believed the argument. He is about to invite the woman investigating him into his building, and he believes this gives him the advantage of controlled terrain. He is wrong, but he does not know it yet, and that gap between what he believes and what is true is the space Imani Cole has been moving through since the moment she opened Patricia Johnson's envelope. Imani builds her board, and the east wall of her office disappears under it. Della's employment records at Shin Enterprises. The original police report, which she reads 4 times and grows quieter with each pass, not because it reveals more on each reading, but because what it conceals becomes more legible the longer she looks. Detective Raymond Okafor's retirement file. The government contract timeline. The biography of the city procurement official who approved it. And at the center of everything, the place her eye returns to without being directed there, a current photograph of Shin Jae-won at 55, taken at a charity gala 6 months ago, his expression carrying the calm of a man who has not been surprised in a very long time. The first flashback comes while she is standing at the board, reaches her without warning, and is gone before she can turn toward it. 6 seconds of a fluorescent-lit corridor, and a feeling of urgency so physical it moves through her sternum like a current. She puts her hand flat on the desk, breathes once deliberately, and keeps working. She has had these moments since she was 14. She knows they pass, and she knows better than to chase them directly. The official story says Della fell, But there is a detail sitting in the police report that nobody who filed or reviewed it apparently thought worth noting. Della's car was logged by parking garage security on the ground level. She had entered the building from below, which means her natural exit was below. The fall that killed her happened on the second level. For the accident narrative to hold, Della would have had to go up, away from her car, away from the exit, away from every reason she had to be in that building at all, for no documented reason. She did not go up voluntarily. She was driven up, the way a person is driven into a corner when every other direction has been closed off. Imani pulls the after-hours security sign-in log for Meridian Tower from the night of October 19th. She has to request it twice. The building management company takes 4 days to locate the 1989 records in off-site storage. And when the page arrives, she finds what she is looking for in less than 30 seconds. One after-hours entry. Shin Jae-won, signed in at 10:54 p.m., no sign-out recorded. He was in that building for the entire window, and in 11 days of what was officially called an investigation, not one detective pulled that log. This is the thing that stays with Imani as she works, not just what was done to Della, but how thoroughly unremarkable the doing of it was. A 20-year-old black woman is found dead. A report is filed. The report is thin and riddled with questions nobody asked. The case is closed. The city moves on. It is not, she knows, an unusual story. It is in fact a story so common that it has a shape, the same shape in city after city, decade after decade, the same corners cut, the same details left unexamined, the same institutional momentum carrying a case toward closure before the ground has been properly covered. The weight of this erasure, not malice alone, but malice made easy by indifference, is something Imani has carried in her work for years, and it settles into her now with a new and pointed sharpness. She drives to Decatur, Georgia, on a Thursday afternoon to find Douglas Webb. He opens his front door, sees her face, and takes one full step backward. Not in alarm, but in the involuntary movement of someone who has been struck by something they were not prepared for. He is 72 years old, his posture shaped by decades of carrying something that was never his to carry, and his eyes are wet before she has spoken her name. He whispers, "Lord have mercy." She tells him who she is and why she is there. He steps aside and lets her in without hesitation, as if he has been waiting for exactly this, which in a way he has. His kitchen smells of coffee and sweet potato and the warmth of a house that has been tended carefully for a long time, the kind of warmth that accumulates in a space the way honesty accumulates in a person, slowly, consistently, as a result of daily choice. He tells her everything. He heard Della running, heard the struggle on the level above, watched the security monitor and saw Shin Jae-won leaving the building at 12:23 in the morning with his jacket in his hand, moving with the controlled pace of someone who is managing how they look while managing how they feel. Douglas went up and found Della. He called the police and gave his statement as it happened. Everything he saw, everything he heard. 3 days later, 2 men came to his house. One placed an envelope on the kitchen table. The other said, without introduction, without raised voice, without anything that could technically be called a threat, that his daughter attended Jefferson High School and caught the number 9 bus home every day at 3:15 in the afternoon. Said it the way you state a fact. The way you state a fact, you want someone to understand you possess. He changed his statement. He has not slept without the weight of that decision somewhere in his chest for 35 years. He raised his daughter. She is 48 now, a school principal in Marietta, and she does not know that the reason she grew up safely is that her father swallowed a truth that belonged to someone else. When Imani asks if he will sign a new statement, the true one, on record with his name on it, Douglas looks at her for a long moment. Not at her eyes or her expression, but at her whole face, the way someone looks when they are holding 2 images in the same field of vision and trying to reconcile them. Then he says, "I have been waiting 35 years for someone to come through that door. I just did not expect it to look like this." He reaches under the kitchen table and produces a tin box, the kind used for biscuits, repurposed for something it was never designed to hold. Inside it, wrapped in a plastic bag sealed with tape that has yellowed to the color of old teeth, is a disposable camera. He says he found it on the garage floor that night before the police arrived. Says something he cannot name told him to pick it up. He never developed it because he was afraid of what it contained, but he never threw it away because the thing he could not name told him not to do that either. Imani takes it with both hands, and the second flashback hits harder than the first. Her own hands on a camera shutter in a dark room, the click and advance of film, young Jaewon's face in a corridor with light behind him, the sensation of running so vivid she feels it in her legs. She grips the edge of the kitchen table until the room comes back. Douglas watches her with those complicated eyes. He says quietly, "You look just like her." Imani looks back at him and says, "I know." She drives back to Atlanta with the camera on the passenger seat. She calls a film restoration specialist in Chicago, one of 4 people in the country with the equipment and expertise for this kind of work, and tells him what she has. He tells her to bring it immediately. She books the next available flight. Her phone rings in the cab to the airport. Unknown number. A voice comes through the line that is smooth in the way of someone professionally trained to make difficult things feel manageable. Measured cadence, warm without being warm. The voice says, "Miss Cole? My name is Harrison Park. I'm the Chief Legal Officer of Shin Global Industries. Mr. Shin would like to invite you to a meeting at your earliest convenience to discuss a matter of mutual interest." Imani does not slow her stride or change her expression. She says, "Tell Mr. Shin I am available Thursday at 2 o'clock. Harrison says that works perfectly, with a satisfaction in his voice that tells her everything about how he thinks this is going to go. He does not know about the camera. He does not know about Douglas Webb. He does not know that the woman he has just invited into his building has been carrying the memory of this case since before she had a name for it. He thinks he is setting a table. He has no idea the table was already set before he called. The specialist's studio in Chicago holds the smell of chemical developer and carefully controlled air, the precise, sealed environment required to coax legibility back from things that have spent decades in the dark. He calls on day 9 with a care in his voice that tells her he understands the weight of what he is holding. He says, 7 usable images. I need you to see these in person. Imani is in Chicago within 3 hours. The photographs lie on the light table under examination lamps, grainy and faded at the edges but readable. Financial documents bearing official city seals alongside handwritten notations, signatures on payment authorizations, a correspondence trail connecting a senior city procurement official named Gerald Marcus to a series of cash disbursements routed through a Shin Enterprises subsidiary. The payments begin 4 months before the government contract was awarded and stop the month after it clears, a pattern so deliberate in its construction that it reads not as careless, but as confident. The financial record of men who were absolutely certain that the people who might look would choose not to. There is one final photograph. Della must have triggered the shutter accidentally as she ran. It captures a blurred figure in the corridor, face unresolvable to the standard required for a legal identification, but the height and build consistent with Jaewon's documented appearance from that period. The timestamp preserved in the film's chemical record reads 11:52 p.m. on October 19, 1989, 8 minutes after his sign-in log entry. 40 minutes before Douglas Webb watched him leave the building. He was with her for 40 minutes. That is the detail the police report did not have room for in its 11 days and 2 paragraphs on page 14. 40 minutes. Imani assembles the complete case across the light table. The photographs, the security log, Douglas Webb's signed statement, Detective Okafor's pension anomaly, the documentation of legacy compliance's years of systematic cold case monitoring, which speaks to a consciousness of guilt no amount of corporate framing can neutralize, and the government contract itself, awarded 30 days after Della Johnson was buried in a plot that cost her mother 3 months of savings. Each piece is strong individually. Together, they form something close to a sealed room. She calls Sandra Obi from the airport. Sandra is 40 years in Georgia criminal law. She listens to the full summary without speaking. And then she says, "No statute of limitations on homicide in this state. Time does not protect him. What protects him is the architecture around him, the lawyers, the systems, the 22 years of institutional management Harrison Park has been running. You need Jaewon on record. You need him to say something in his own voice that he cannot walk back." Imani says she has a meeting with him Thursday. Sandra thinks for a moment and says, "Walk in with everything. Show him only part of it. Watch what he instinctively reaches for." Here is something worth holding on to, because this story is about more than one woman and one case. In the United States, Black women and girls are reported missing and found dead at rates that consistently outpace the institutional attention given to those deaths. Cold cases involving Black female victims are closed faster, investigated with fewer resources, and reopened less frequently than comparable cases involving other demographics. And this is not a finding from advocacy groups, it is documented in the FBI's own data. Della Johnson's case was not an anomaly, it was a pattern expressed as a person. The 11 days it took to close her case, the 2 paragraphs in the newspaper, the pension that nobody questioned, these are not the fingerprints of one corrupt detective. They are the fingerprints of a system that had practiced this economy of attention for a very long time. What makes Imani's work matter, in this case, and in every case she has taken since she left her badge on that desk, is that she refuses to let the pattern stand in for the person. Della Johnson was 20 years old. She had a mother who kept her photograph on the kitchen table for 35 years. She had a mind sharp enough to build a case from 3 weeks of observation. She deserved 11 months of investigation, not 11 days. That is what Imani is carrying into Thursday's meeting. Not just a case file, a refusal. And here is where it gets interesting. Because she is not walking into that meeting as a hunter who has found her target. She's walking into a room where the target has already seen her coming and extended the invitation himself, believing the controlled terrain gives him the advantage. The question Thursday will answer is not whether Imani has enough to break through. The question is whether Shin Jae-won, at 55, after 35 years, with everything he has built standing behind him, still has enough of himself left to tell the truth when the moment makes it impossible not to. Wednesday evening, the night before the meeting. Imani drives to Meridian Tower. The building still stands on the same block, wearing a different company name on the lobby directory now, the same glass catching the last of the evening light the same way it always has. The parking garage ramp descends into shadow the way it did 35 years ago, and the air at its entrance holds that underground cold, concrete and enclosed metal and still air that has not moved freely in a long time. Tonight she gets out of the car and walks in. The cold hits her at the threshold and her throat tightens, the panic beginning its familiar climb. She keeps walking. Second level, the ramp, the low ceiling, the fluorescent light she has been seeing in her dreams since she was 14 years old. She finds the spot without looking for it, simply stops walking because her body stops, and she stands there. The full memory. The complete sequence of Della Johnson's last 40 minutes on this earth. The filing cabinet on the 4th floor, the cold metal handle under her fingers. The camera in her hands and the mechanical sound it made as she advanced the film between each frame, click and turn, in a room where she should not have been and knew it, and went anyway, because she had decided the truth of what she had found was worth more than her safety. The footsteps in the corridor. The door opening. His voice, quiet, almost gentle, which was the most frightening thing about it. The stairwell, the 2nd level. The camera falling from her jacket and skidding across the concrete with a sound she felt in her teeth. His hands. The cold of the floor. And then 5 words, spoken quietly, with something in them that she felt even then was not cruelty, but something more complicated and in some ways worse, almost sorrowful, almost confessional, as if he were apologizing to himself for something he had already decided to do. In the memory, young Jaewon's voice is barely above a whisper. I did not want this. And then Della's last thought, the last thing that moved through her before everything stopped, and it was not surrender. It was not the resignation of someone who accepts that it is over. It was the hardest, most deliberate thing she ever did. It was a decision. She decided in that final moment that this would not be the end of it, that the truth she had found would not die with her, that whoever came after, and she believed, with the absolute conviction of someone who has nothing left to lose and therefore nothing left to be cautious about, that whoever came after would find what she had started. Through the last of the memory, Della's voice comes as barely a breath. Somebody will find out. Somebody will come. Imani stands in the garage for a long time. The panic is gone, not diminished. Gone. Completely, as if it were a tenant who had been waiting for the lease to end and has now, quietly, vacated. What remains in its place is not peace exactly, but something adjacent to it. The stillness of a person who has stopped carrying a question they have been carrying for 20 years because the question has finally answered itself. She looks at the spot on the concrete floor, and she says, barely above a whisper, "I'm here. I came." She had spent her entire career following a feeling she called instinct because she lacked the word for what it actually was. Standing in this garage, she understood, finally and completely, that the feeling was not instinct. It was a woman who had been refused the chance to finish what she started and who had found the only door available to her and walked through it. And tomorrow, Imani was going to stand in a room with the man who closed that door and make sure the world knew what he did. Thursday morning, 6 hours before the meeting, the phone rings at 7:42. It is Sandra Obi, and her voice carries the flat quality of someone delivering news they wish they did not have. She says, Harrison Park filed an emergency injunction at 6 this morning, investigative harassment claim. He is seeking a court order to block any inquiry into Shin Global's historical records, contracts, financial instruments, procurement documentation from the 1989 period. He has a judge who signed it before 9 a.m. Imani sits with this. Sandra continues. He moved fast, faster than someone moves who is not genuinely afraid. The injunction is tight. It covers the city procurement records, the 1989 contract documentation, everything that would anchor the financial side of the case. He is cutting the paper trail at its source. Imani asks whether the injunction covers photographs recovered from private property. Sandra says it does not. The filing is specific to official institutional records. Imani asks whether it covers a signed eyewitness statement from a private individual not named in the filing. Sandra goes quiet for 3 full seconds. Then she says, Imani, tell me exactly how much you have. Imani tells her. Sandra listens, and the quality of her silence changes as she does. When Imani finishes, Sandra says, he sealed an empty room. Imani says, I need you at the building by 2:30. I want 30 minutes with him before the lawyers take over. She hangs up. This is the thing Harrison Park miscalculated when he moved before sunrise. He built his career on managing institutional risk, documents, records, official channels, the formal infrastructure through which evidence travels from event to consequence. He is masterful at it. What he did not account for is that the most important evidence in this case was never institutional. It was a disposable camera kept in a tin box under a kitchen table by a man who was afraid and kept it anyway, because something in him understood that truth is not the same as documentation and does not require official channels to survive. There's one more thing Harrison Park did not account for. At 8:15 that morning, 90 minutes before the injunction was filed, 45 minutes before Harrison's legal team had any reason to think she had moved, Imani submitted the complete case file to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. Every photograph, every statement, the security log, the pension records, the legacy compliance documentation, all of it, time-stamped, received, and in the hands of prosecutors who are not subject to Harrison Park's judge before Harrison's judge ever saw the filing. The injunction arrives at the DA's office at 9:47 a.m. and is noted briefly as irrelevant to the material already received. Harrison Park's most sophisticated defensive move in 22 years of managing this secret has just arrived to a door that was already closed from the inside. Here's where we want you to do something. Not for us, but for this story. If Della's case has reached you the way it should, share this video right now with one person who needs to hear it. Not because we are asking you to grow this channel, though we are grateful when you do, but because a story about a life dismissed in 11 days deserves every person it can reach. Share it. It matters. At 1:58 p.m., Imani Cole walks into Shin Global Industries with the full weight of a 35-year case in a single black folder under her arm. Shin Jae-won, who has managed this from behind lawyers and systems and the institutional insulation of serious money for 3.5 decades, is about to sit across a table from the woman who has been carrying the memory of what he did since before she had language for it. He does not know what is in that folder. He does not know what she knows. And he has absolutely no idea that the one thing he has kept private, the one thing he held as belonging only to him, is about to be returned to him across a conference table by the person he least expected to have it. The glass behind Jae-won holds the Atlanta skyline in late afternoon light, and Harrison Park sits to his right with a legal pad open, pen uncapped, fingers arranged with the stillness of a man who is performing composure. Jae-won stands when Imani enters. She sits. She places the black folder on the table. She does not open it. His voice is the voice of a man who has been in rooms like this one, rooms with questions in them, rooms with implications in them. He says, "Miss Cole, my team tells me you've been making inquiries into some of our company's historical records. We wanted to address any concerns you have directly, rather than through intermediaries." Imani looks at him across the table with the kind of stillness that comes not from calm, but from absolute certainty about what is about to happen, and says, "I'm investigating the murder of Della Johnson. October 1989. She was 20 years old. She worked for Shin Enterprises. She was killed in the parking garage of Meridian Tower." Harrison uncaps his pen with a small, decisive click and says smoothly, "The death of Miss Johnson was ruled accidental by the Atlanta Police Department following a thorough investigation." And Imani does not raise her voice. She does not look at Harrison. Her eyes stay on Jae-won across the length of the table, and she says, "The detective who ruled it accidental retired 6 months later on a pension exceeding his city salary by 300%. The after-hours security sign-in log from Meridian Tower on the night Della died shows one entry. Your name. No sign-out recorded." She opens the folder and slides the first photograph across the table. She says, "Della was photographing documents on the 4th floor when she was found. She dropped her camera running. That camera was recovered from the garage floor the night she died by the security guard on duty who kept it for 35 years, and has now signed a full statement describing what he witnessed. The images were developed 4 days ago in a laboratory in Chicago." She slides the second photograph. She says the financial documents in these photographs connect a senior city procurement official to a series of payments routed through Shin Enterprises subsidiaries in the 6 months before a $200 million government contract was awarded. The injunction your office filed this morning covers official institutional records. It does not cover photographs recovered from private property, and it does not cover the complete case file I submitted to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office at 8:15 this morning. Harrison's pen stops moving. Jae-won has not shifted in his chair since she began speaking. His face is composed with the practiced completeness of a man who has managed his expression in difficult rooms for decades, and the management is holding, but only just, and Imani can see exactly where the seams are. She says she came out through the back stairwell, the one with the broken light on the 3rd floor landing. She made it to the 2nd level of the parking garage before you caught up with her. His voice, when it comes, is very quiet. That detail was never in any report, Harrison says sharply. Jae-won, do not say another. Imani says it, quietly, without rush. The way you say something you have been carrying for a long time and are finally setting down in the right place. She says, "I did not want this." He stops. Completely. The pen falls from his fingers. His hands close against the table surface, and the color leaves his face, not quickly, not dramatically, but in the slow and complete way of something draining through a crack that has finally become too wide to manage. He closes his eyes. Nobody alive knew those words. He had said them once, in a parking garage. to a girl who died before she could repeat them to anyone. He had kept them as the one thing that was only his private accounting of what he had done, the only honest sentence he had spoken in the whole of that night. And this woman was saying them back to him, as if she had been there. When he opens his eyes, something that has been held in sustained, exhausting tension for 35 years is visible on his face. Not guilt, he long ago compressed guilt into something livable and set it in a corner. Something older. In Korean there is a word, han. It is not a word that translates simply into English because it describes a feeling that English has not named with the same precision. The accumulated, unspoken grief of a wound that was never answered, carried in the body rather than the mind, surfacing not as anger or sadness, but as a deep, exhausted recognition that the dead exists and has always existed and will continue to exist until something addresses it directly. It lives in the chest. It looks when it finally surfaces, less like breaking than like release. Harrison stands and his voice carries something that might be desperation dressed as authority. He says, "This meeting is over. Miss Cole, all further communication will go through legal counsel, and I would strongly advise." Jaewon says, quietly and with complete finality, "Sit down, Harrison." Harrison says his name the way you say someone's name when you are trying to remind them of something they are about to forget. Jaewon says, "Sit down," and this time it is not a request and it is not a suggestion, and the room responds to the specific gravity in it, the way rooms have always responded to him. Harrison sits. His hands on the legal pad are no longer steady. Jaewon looks at Imani. He looks at her with the full, unmanaged attention of someone who has stopped performing composure, and then something shifts in him. Something surfaces and retreats in the same moment. And he says, his voice dropping, "What you have is circumstantial. A camera with no clear identification, one witness who changed his statement once before, a financial trail that my lawyers have already." Imani lets him finish. She does not rush to counter it. She waits until the last word has landed, until the silence after it has its full weight, and then she says evenly, "The DA's office received everything this morning, including your voluntary sign-in on the night of October 19th, 1989. What they do with it is no longer in either of our hands. What is in your hands, right now, in this room, is whether you spend whatever time this takes fighting something that is already filed, or whether you get ahead of it while there is still something to be said in your own voice." The room holds the charged silence of a decision being made. Jaewon looks at the window, at the skyline he assembled across 35 years, at the architecture of glass and reputation and distance he built above one night in a parking garage. And then he looks back at Imani, and the self-preservation retreats entirely, and what is left is the exhausted, unguarded face of a 55-year-old man who's been 20 years old inside for a very long time. He says, "What do you need from me?" But what happens next? Nobody in that room anticipated it, and almost nobody outside it would have. Jaewon's surrender lasts 4 minutes. 4 minutes of Harrison Park sitting at that table with his legal pad and his uncapped pen and watching 22 years of careful management dissolve in real time, and then he stands, collects his things with the unhurried precision of a man who has made a decision that does not require announcement. And he walks out of the conference room without a word. No argument, no threat, no dramatic exit. He simply leaves, and the absence of theater in it is the most alarming thing Imani has seen in the entire investigation. She says to Jaewon, "Where is he going?" Jaewon looks at the door with something that is new on his face. Not guilt, not composure, but the unease of a man who has just realized that the thing he believed was under his control has been under someone else's management for much longer than he knew. He says, "Harrison always had a contingency. I knew that. I just did not think he would use it against me." Imani is calling Sandra Obi before he finishes the sentence. Sandra picks up immediately and says, "He filed a second motion 20 minutes ago. He is claiming the photographs were obtained through illegal means, arguing the camera constitutes property of Meridian Tower and that its unauthorized removal compromises the chain of custody. He wants the photographic evidence excluded entirely." Imani says, Douglas Webb found that camera on the garage floor before police arrived, kept it as personal property for 35 years, and there is no record of it ever being logged, reported, or claimed by the building. It was never Meridian Tower's property. Sandra says that argument will prevail eventually, but that eventually is the operative word. And Harrison is buying time, and he knows it. Then she says there's more. He filed a counter-complaint with the DA's office at the same time. Witness coercion claim against you regarding Douglas Webb's statement. He is going after your investigator's license. If it lands, everything you gathered becomes associated with a challenged source. The conference room holds a silence with weight in it. Jaewon says quietly, I did not ask him to do this. There is something in his voice that is not quite an apology. Something closer to the acknowledgement of a person who is seeing for the first time the full shape of what they set in motion 35 years ago. She looks at him and says, I know, he is protecting himself now. He has been protecting you for 22 years, and now he is pivoting, and the only thing that stops him from succeeding is if the foundation of this case cannot be pulled. She pauses, and then she says it plainly. A voluntary statement. On record. Your account of October 19, 1989, given without conditions and without a deal attached, before his filings reach the people reviewing them. It becomes the anchor. Everything else becomes secondary to it. And you face what you did. Jaewon looks at her for a long moment. This is the actual choice, not the collapse in the meeting, which was the body surrendering before the mind caught up, but this one, deliberate and clear-eyed, made with full knowledge of what it costs. He looks at the window one more time. Then he says, call whoever you need to call. Harrison Park's counter-complaint arrives at the DA's office at 3:47 p.m. Jaewon's voluntary statement, witnessed, signed, and on the record in his own words, is time-stamped 3:21 p.m. 26 minutes ahead. The most elaborate contingency Harrison Park has constructed in 22 years of professional suppression arrives to find that the door it was designed to close has already been bolted from the other side. The Fulton County District Attorney's Office formally charges Shin Jae-won with second-degree murder on a Friday afternoon, with the full case file, photographs, eyewitness statement, security log, financial documentation, and Jaewon's own voluntary account of the night of October 19, 1989, forming the evidential foundation. Harrison Park is charged separately. Conspiracy to obstruct justice, witness intimidation, and 22 years of documented suppression activity through legacy compliance laid out in a prosecution filing that Sandra Obi describes, without hyperbole, as the cleanest document she has read in 4 decades of criminal law. Harrison's exit from Shin Global Industries that evening is unremarkable. He walks through the lobby at his usual pace, gets into the back of a car, and is driven away. A single street-level news camera catches his face briefly as the door closes, and his expression carries only the look of a man whose internal arithmetic has returned an unfavorable result for the first time. There is no drama in it. He does not earn drama. Della Johnson's case, open for 35 years under a classification of accidental death, stored in a box in an off-site records facility with a 2-paragraph newspaper clipping folded inside it, is officially and permanently reclassified. Homicide. Victim, Della Marie Johnson. Age 20, October 19, 1989. Patricia Johnson receives the call at home, sitting at the kitchen table where Della's photograph has rested face up for 35 years, kept in the light the way some people keep a candle burning in a window for someone they are waiting for. She listens to the full statement from the DA's liaison. She says nothing for a long time. Then she says, "Thank you," in the voice of someone who rehearsed those words in case they were ever needed and never fully believed they would be. She puts the phone down and cries. Not quietly. The full, unmeasured grief of 35 years, releasing in a body that has been holding it in careful portions this whole time. Imani visits her that afternoon. She sits at the kitchen table, across from the photograph of Della in natural light, with her chin slightly lifted and her left brow raised. Patricia holds Imani's hands across the table, holds them with the grip of someone who is holding more than hands, and says, "She always said the truth doesn't disappear. Since she was a little girl, She would say it like she had been told from somewhere reliable, somewhere deeper than what any of us taught her. I used to think it was faith. Now I think she just knew. Imani looks at Della's photograph. She says she did. That evening, Imani returns to the parking garage one final time. She goes not because she needs to, but because she needs to know whether what she felt standing there the night before, the release, the absence of the panic that has been her constant companion since childhood, is permanent, or whether it belonged only to that hour before the confrontation and has since retreated. She needs to know whether she is free of it. She needs to know that Della is. She walks in. Second level. The ramp, the low ceiling, the fluorescent hum. She stands at the spot. Nothing. No tightness, no cold in her hands, no constriction in her throat. The panic that lived in her bones for 34 years is simply absent. Gone the way a sound you have lived with for so long, it became part of the room, becomes audible only when it stops. A sound behind her, unhurried footsteps on the concrete ramp. And she turns. Shin Jae-won is standing at the top of the ramp. He is not in a suit. He has come in the anonymity of a man who has left his armor somewhere else. No building behind him, no lawyers beside him, no 42nd floor framing him as something that cannot be touched. He looks smaller than he did across the conference table, and he looks older, and he looks, for the first time in everything Imani has seen of him, like a person rather than a construction. He walks to where she is standing. He looks at the spot on the concrete floor. He stands there beside her without speaking, the way someone stands who has come to a place not to do something, but to be somewhere, because being somewhere is the only form of acknowledgement available. After a long time, he speaks. His voice carries the full, unmanaged weight of everything it has been containing for 35 years, and it is very quiet, and it is directed not at Imani, but at the spot on the floor between them. And he says simply, "I am sorry, Della." Imani does not tell him she is not Della. She does not tell him she is. She says nothing at all, because this moment does not belong to her, and taking it, even to correct it, even to clarify, would be a form of theft. She lets it go where it needs to go, which is down, into the concrete, into the 35 years of air in this space, into whatever it is that has been waiting here with more patience than either of them can account for. He says 4 words. He says, "Thank you for coming." He turns and walks back up the ramp. His footsteps recede and disappear, and then there is only the sound of the city above. A car on the street, a distant voice, the ordinary, unremarkable noise of a world that kept moving, while all of this was happening in the spaces underneath it. Imani opens her dream journal, the 6th one, the last entry, the last page, and crosses out the 4 words she wrote at 3 a.m. 2 weeks ago. "I was there." She writes 3 words beneath them. Now it is done. She closes the journal. Above her, the fluorescent light directly over the spot on the floor flickers once. The brief, involuntary tremor of electricity moving through old wiring and then steadies. Warm and clear and perfectly still. The light holds. There is a truth underneath this story that has nothing to do with reincarnation or corporate fraud or cold cases, and it is worth saying plainly. This story is about what happens to the people whose lives are assigned less value by the systems that are supposed to protect them. Della Johnson was 20 years old, sharp enough to build an evidentiary case from 3 weeks of observation, courageous enough to act on it, and gone in 11 days. Not because the truth was hidden well, but because the people responsible for finding it decided, without much deliberation, that it was not worth finding. She was not the exception to a rule. She was the rule, expressed as a person. What Imani did, what Douglas Webb did 35 years before Imani arrived, was refuse to let the rule stand in for the person. That refusal is not heroic in the way stories usually mean. It is quiet and costly, and it takes longer than it should, but it is the only thing that works. Now, here is the question we want you to sit with, and we genuinely want your answer in the comments. The moment Imani quoted Jaewon's exact words back to him, across that table. 5 words spoken in a parking garage 35 years ago that nobody else alive had ever heard. What do you believe that was? The deepest possible form of investigative instinct. the kind that travels through documentary evidence and witness testimony and dream journals kept since the age of 14? Or something older than instinct, traveling forward through a door that most of us do not believe exists, looking for the chance to finish what it started? Tell us what you think. These conversations matter to us, and we read every single one. Next week, we bring you a story about a Black woman who takes a position as cleaning staff inside a powerful Korean family's crumbling empire and discovers that the secret she was hired to keep buried is the only thing that can save it. She has a skill nobody hired her for, a history she has told no one, and approximately 72 hours before everything falls apart. The opening scene will stop you cold. We are not saying that lightly. And if this story reached you, if Della's 35 years moved something in you, subscribe to this channel and share this with one person who deserves to hear a story told at this level. Come back next week, because the stories we tell here are not just entertainment. They are the ones that stay with you,